And
So the grand juries were an early form of local government that dates back to the medieval period. The members were appointed by the county sheriff and were usually major landowners, as can be seen in this, such as William Stackpoole and many others. They were initially concerned with the administration of justice, but later took control of building and maintaining roads, bridges, infirmaries, asylums, workhouses, courthouses, and jails. A grand jury was empowered to levy a local county cess, which is a tax or rate, and met at spring and summer assizes where works were assessed. These presentments or works, which consisted of printed lists of proposed and approved works to be undertaken, give a useful insight into infrastructural developments in the county. These works which were not undertaken were known as undischarged queries. Each volume lists the names of sheriffs, justices, and the members. They were also involved in surveying Clare for the first time since 1638. As you can see from this map from 1787, they were not detailed. This role then went to the Ordnance Survey in later years. The Clare County Archives contains a collection of 42 volumes of grand jury presentments, dating from 1784 to 1792 and 1870 to 1900. We also hold letters and circulars to the grand jury, as can be seen from this volume. They were superseded under the Local Government Act 1898 when the County Council was formed. The council was democratically elected to run the council, and the vote was given to both men and women. We can see the first minutes of Clare County Council from 1899 here. The new council had 34 members, 20 elected by popular vote, 2 co-opted by the other councillors, chairmen of the rural district councils, and 3 from the grand jury. All of the grand jury records are available online on the Digital Repository of Ireland. And now we'll move on to our next collection. So we also have the Barrett family papers, and I'll just give a brief background of the Barrett family. So during the late 19th century, Ireland was in a period of significant change, with movements emerging to promote Irish identity, culture and independence. During this time, Sylvester and Joanna Barrett from Barnageeha, Dara, County Clare, raised 16 children, 10 boys and 6 girls who would all play a vital role in the struggle for Irish independence. Sylvester and Joanna were strong advocates of Irish republicanism and fostered a deep love for culture, politics and tradition. Their children were deeply influenced by this and actively involved in the struggle. We have our collection divided up into 2 parts, which is the Barrett family papers and the Barrett brothers auctioneering firm. The family included the eldest son, Joseph Barrett, who was a renowned leader of the Mid-Clare Brigade, participating in key operations like the Munreal Ambush. Another son, John or Jack, was involved in Howth gun running in 1914 and died in World War I in 1917. Frank Barrett led the Mid-Clare Brigade and later co-founded Fianna Fáil in 1926, and his son Sylvester Barrett became a TD and MEP. The Barrett sisters were also involved, with them being members of Cumann na mBan. We've just picked out a few highlights of the Barrett collection. So our first one here is operational and intelligence files belonging to Joe Barrett Sr. These intelligence files contain orders on destruction of residences, instructions on petrol tin mines and explosives, names and addresses of members of the British Senate, lists of railway men and women useful for connections. And we also have photos of the Mid-Clare Brigade, including Frank Barrett, photos of general parades of volunteers from 1922 taken at Kilfenora. Our second highlight is from the times of the emergency in the 1940s. These are copybooks with handwritten notes on map reading, arms training, war gas, field orders and lists of soldiers. Both Joseph and his son Josh, or Joe Barrett Jr., served with the Defence Forces. Our third one is Cumann na mBan claims. We have many Cumann na mBan claims in our collection that Joe Barrett was also involved in writing references for people. Our fourth one is a 25-inch to the mile map of Scariff, which was used in the Barrett Brothers auctioneering firm, which they worked at for over 50 years, which is another chapter in the Barrett's lives. Our fifth ones are matters of ephemera, such as Joe Barrett's hat, Joe Barrett Sr.'s hat, a scrapbook of the Barrett family containing pictures of Peg, Eamon de Valera and many others, such as letters as well. We also have photo albums owned by the Barretts. It's unsure who were in these photo albums. This is just a brief overview of the Barrett family. Thank you for listening.
Hey, how you doing? What I'm going to show you here are three collections, three personal collections. These are quite different to the local authority collections that you would have seen in the earlier clips. And their collections belong to three landed gentry families in Clare. They basically portray three different kind of times and three different types of views that these families would have held. And I'll just go through the diaries. The first is a diary of a lady called Mary Going. Now, the Going family moved to Broadford in 1778, and by the time you get to the mid-19th century, they have a large house built and they have a large holding. And Mary is the daughter of James Going, the original landowner. She is an evangelical Protestant. She's particularly interested in converting the local Catholic population, and she has what I would describe as particular views on the indigenous Irish and the views of a landlord of this time, really. It's a fascinating insight into her world. The diary spans the years 1840 to 1843, and she's dealing specifically with a very small world. She leaves, I suppose, what you would call a cloistered existence. She's in the big house, she's kind of travelling in the area, she occasionally goes into Limerick, and she records all this in great detail, really. Now, the thing with this is that she lived until 1891, so she lived to see great changes. And but the most interesting kind of period in which she seemed to live was during the famine, or at least the years leading up to the famine. And she really details a lot of the kind of social situation that was going on in that part of Clare at the time, almost inadvertently, because she's living in this kind of castle up on the hill, I guess. At the same time, she passes by the ordinary people, and you can see, I suppose, that there's a disaster waiting to happen. But she's in her own little world, and her own little world is concerned with this proselytizing. And the diary itself was donated by Hugh Weir to the Clare County Archives a number of years ago, and Declan Barron, historian, did the unenviable job of basically transcribing all of these entries, and you can see here where he wrote it out on these copybooks, and there are several of these copybooks. It's an absolutely fantastic job to show you kind of an image of the original page here. You can kind of see that it's in January 1843, and here's Declan's transcription. And if you can see some of the words are in red, and you can kind of see how he's not absolutely sure of the text because it is so hard to read it. And if you kind of look in the text, it says, "Through the mercy of my God I am spared again to mark the commencement of another year, and oh, of thine infinite goodness, gracious Father," and so on it goes. So it's a mixture of biblical quotations and references, and it's a very, very specific style of writing, very, very old style. And Mary Going is, I would say, very much of her time. She's very much this mid-19th century Anglo-Irish landed gentry person. Now, I'm going to go to the next collection, which is the collection of the diaries of Henrietta Butler of Castlecryn in Six Mile Bridge. And Henrietta Butler is from the same sort of background as Mary Going, but again, somewhat different. And because it's further on in the 19th century, there are many differences to this. She basically recorded 6 diaries from 1877 to 1896, and most of them are concerned with her life in Six Mile Bridge and the times that she would have spent in England. But diary 4 of the 6 diaries is taken up with a year in 1888 when she travelled from Ireland to Britain and then to South America, right around Cape Horn, up to the other side of the Americas and back again. And while she was there are many amazing entries in it, I guess. One of the most remarkable entries is when she's in a cathedral in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, and she meets a gentleman who has converted to Catholicism from Protestantism, and they have this remarkable discussion of the 39 Articles of Faith, of the Anglican Church, of the power of the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church, and it's quite remarkable. She also, when she was on the ship, met with many people and recorded them, and she's remarkably modern in the way she portrays people. So she meets these three gentlemen here. There's Mr. Hector P, Mr. Su, and Mr. Fu. Mr. Su and Mr. Fu were representatives of the Imperial Chinese government, basically the Department for War. And when we think of a Department of War, she actually notes herself that the Department of Defense in Britain at the time had existed for about 100 years, and the Chinese department had existed since the 14th century. So these people are quite remarkable. This is right at the end of the Chinese Empire. So there are so many remarkable entries in it that I could talk about it all day, but it's an absolutely fantastic resource, and we have digitized it. So it's available to view in the library digitally, and it's really amazing stuff. Again, she's of her time, and she's a landlord, and she has what we would consider to be quite backward kind of views and ways of the local Irish population, but at the same time she's more advanced than Mary Going. The third item in many ways is the most interesting. It's a farm diary of Frances Ievers, and this woman married into the Ievers family in 6 Mile Bridge, Mount Ievers, and effectively ran the estate and later on the farm. Now, when I say estate and then farm, what you're talking about is the movement from being landlords to becoming farmers. And that's what happens with the Ievers family. What happens with the Butler family and with the Going family is that they don't make the transition. They leave Ireland, they go to Britain. Eventually their properties are demolished, but Mount Ievers is still there and they still farm the land. But what you can see in this, and if you look here particularly, you can see there's dissension between the Ievers family and their tenants, and that's detailed here. And it's 1923, it's the Civil War, it's a really troubled time, and yet the Ievers are able to, I guess, kind of maneuver themselves and evolve, so that if you see here, she has what she describes as a momentous meeting with Michael Brennan, who had been in the War of Independence, the leader of the East Clare Brigade, along with his brother, and later on became the head of the Irish Army, and he meets to mediate on the kind of issues that the Ievers wanted sorted out, and as I say, as a result, the Ievers survived. I just want to make one last note before I finish up here, and note that this diary here, the Butler diary, went to England with the family, and thereafter in the 1990s a relative of the Butler family, Grant Miosevich, actually took the diaries to Australia, and it was him who donated them to the Clare Libraries, so we'd like to thank him for that. It was a great donation. In this case, Frances Jury, who's a descendant of the Ievers family and who lives in Great Namana in Kilkenny, donated this diary to myself. I went down to meet her only just last year, and again, it's a fantastic edition, and again, like the Butler diaries, we've had it scanned. Thank you. Okay, so this collection is a really interesting collection. It's one of the most recent ones that we've taken in, and it's a collection that I would say is as rare as hen's teeth, this type of collection in Ireland, primarily because of Ireland's troubled history. It's a collection of material relating to the harbour and to the port of Clarecastle, and by extension the port of County Clare, of Ennis, and of all kind of surrounds. It belonged to the Power family. The Powers basically founded their dynasty in Clarecastle in 1872, when Patrick Power came out from Ballier to set up his business. At various times they had various businesses. They were pub owners, they had a shop, they were coal merchants, they imported wood, they exported all kinds of items as well, and the ships went out as far as Danzig, all over Europe, and indeed to America from Clarecastle. The problem with harbour records in Ireland is, and while I said they're as rare as hen's teeth, is that a huge amount of material was destroyed in 1920 in the Custom House during the War of Independence. And as a result, there are relatively few of these records, and I would say hardly any of these records for this part of Ireland. You have a couple of records for Galway and a certain amount of records for Limerick, but this is a really, really complete collection dating from about the turn of the 19th century to the effective end of the harbour, which would have been in the mid 1970s. So the harbour now would have existed from the 13th century. So we know that a castle was founded in Clarecastle by a guy, Robert de Muskelgrow, in the 1250s. We know that shortly after that he set up a market or a fair rather, the Fair of Clare, which would have run from the 13th century to 1968. And as well as that, we know there was some sort of facility for boats to come in. And the big problem for Ennis was that Ennis couldn't receive larger vessels and Clarecastle could. So Clarecastle, which originally was the first capital of Clare in the 16th century, then that was taken over by Ennis later on, but Clarecastle effectively became the main port for Ennis and the surrounding area. So what you see here are a number of basically items relating to the harbour board, over which the powers would have been involved, and particularly Patrick Power and the Bernard Power and many other members of the Power family would have had involvement. And there are three items really. You have the receipts and expenditure for the harbour board, and that is basically going again from the early 20th century and going right up along. And we see it here for the year 1939, so it's just coming into the Second World War. There's going to be a major change in that. And there's also information on the maintenance of the harbour. And this is particularly interesting because the harbour itself architecturally is a very, very interesting place. It was built by Lucius O'Brien in the 18th century. It's a very fine harbour, and it had capacity for very, very, very large ships. So you also have a register of shipping, which is really, really interesting. So kind of the stuff I was saying earlier on when I was talking about ships coming in from Danzig, ships coming in from various parts of Europe, huge trade within the UK, and kind of something that documents really in a broader way the economic history of Clare and the area around Ennis as much as it does the economic history of the harbour in Clarecastle. What we're talking about here are huge amounts of flour either coming in or going out. In 1837 it was recorded that 60,000 barrels were exported out of Ennis alone, and that would have been through the stores in Clarecastle, and that was in 1837. And the trade itself continued. It changed. Things ebb and flow. You go from corn to flour, from flour to wool, from wool to woolen goods, and linen and other goods. And also there was a very, very profitable lead and silver mine at Kilbreckan, which existed for maybe 20-30 years until it flooded. And so they were exporting silver and gold as well, or out from Clarecastle too. I guess the best set of harbour records that exist in Ireland are the Waterford Harbour Commissioners, which dates from 1816 to about the 1960s. So to kind of show that the best set of records that we would have in the country date from 1816 to the 1960s. These go from about 1900 to 1975. The last ship that came into Clarecastle came in the summer of 1969. It came from Sweden, and it was delivering wood. And after that point, with the EC, with the open market, the end of protectionism, it died the death, I guess, which is unfortunate. But it still exists today as an amazing amenity. The Power family themselves celebrated 150 years in business, but John Power recently handed on control of the business, and as a result, we received this donation, which was he was helped in great part by Eric Shaw as well in donating the items. We'd like to thank Eric as well as John Power and the Power family as well. The last thing I'm going to show is this item here, which is from the National Bank, and it's basically a cheque from the National Bank. And it's important. The National Bank plays a very, very important role in the growth of Catholic businesses, in the growth of mills, in the growth of industry of all kinds, but to the greatest degree probably in the growth of what's called the spirit grocer, who'd be the person that is basically the main trader in the town. And it gives Catholics the wherewithal to basically take out loans and to develop their businesses. So this really is a great collection. And again, it's been scanned. So thank you.